So in my last video, I talked about how we can start to break down a lot of the meetings and collaborations that we have into more asynchronous work and the benefits of that within a hybrid workplace. So it's not just as easy as saying we're going to work differently. There are some steps that you need to take and things you need to put in place to make that transition easier. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. So if you didn't see my video, you can watch it up here. Essentially what I did is break down what a typical collaboration looks like and how you can start to translate that into a bit more asynchronous work. And the benefit of that, and what I mean by asynchronous work, is work that you do individually rather than synchronous work at the same time or together. And the benefit of that is you're not wasting so much time trying to find a time slot for a massive workshop where everyone's available. You also just gives you more autonomy around when you work on what you need to work on. And so there are quite a lot of benefits from moving towards a more asynchronous work. However, it's not that easy. If it was, we'd all be doing it. And so I did get some feedback that how do we actually implement that within my team? And there are a few things that I would suggest you do because there is a lot of accountability that is placed on people when you work asynchronously. And so there are probably a few things that you need to do. And the first thing I recommend is to actually go through the process of breaking down your current meetings, collaborations, etc. with your team or whoever in your workplace you need to or you want to transition to working more asynchronously with. So you can go and have a look at my previous video and essentially do that. Go through what are your current collaborations, what do you currently do synchronously now, and what makes sense to move towards a more asynchronous way of working. So as I said in my previous video, I believe that synchronous is really for discussion and decision making, whereas asynchronous can be essentially everything else, brainstorming, pre-reading, providing context, anything that sets people up for the meeting rather than having to do it in the meeting. So once you've got everyone on board around what you want to do asynchronously, the next thing you need to do is talk about what steps and processes and expectations you're going to put in place to ensure people are accountable. So deciding that something is synchronous versus asynchronous is one thing, but how you actually put that into practice is a little bit more difficult. So you should, with the same group of people, come up with the rules that you will, or guidelines rather than rules, that you will stick to make sure that everyone's accountable. So that could be things like you can't set up a meeting unless you have an agenda. So that seems really basic, but the benefit of doing something like that means you will have to really think about what that meeting is for, what it covers, and potentially what could be made asynchronous. The other things you could do is set expectations around what people should receive prior to any collaboration invite. So what kind of context do you need to provide? What lead time if you're asking them to actually complete some form of work or asynchronous work prior to that collaboration or meeting. What's a realistic lead time for that? Now obviously things can be a bit, some things can just come up last minute and that's fine, but we're talking about guidelines that should be just generally applied across the board. So you may actually want to put together a template for how collaboration is run that will set those expectations and essentially force everyone to make sure that they're being accountable. So the next thing that you and also everyone who's now going to be working this new way needs to do is make sure that there is time set aside for asynchronous work. So at least 15 minutes a day or, every couple of days should be enough for you to get through that sort of content. I wouldn't expect you'd need much more because essentially it's going to be just providing some feedback, doing some brainstorming, some reading. So 15 minutes should suffice. And And ideally, the whole point of moving asynchronous is to give you more control of your day. So we don't want this to become something that's overwhelming. So ideally, you want to set yourself up that 15 minutes is reserved for meetings, collaborations, etc. that are happening, say, 2 days away. You don't want to be trying to do stuff today to then walk into that meeting and feel a bit unprepared. And so if you can get yourself into a cadence where you're actually completing any asynchronous work a couple of days beforehand, that's going to be the best approach. So if you want to give this a go with your team, I actually have a template that you can use. It's linked down below in the comment section. And as always, if you are interested in hearing more about how you can manage your information both at work and at home, make sure you subscribe to my channel.